going to give us a lovely goodbye remarks. And for that, I want you to, again, once more, please welcome Professor Schwab into the Global Shapers family. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Great to be back. Now, when we met first time at the beginning, I said I have 3 objectives for you. The first one was, do you go away from here with a very good new friend, at least one, whom you feel you will stay in contact for a long, long time. Second, do you go away and you have the feeling that in somewhere, in some form, your life was transformed? And number 3, do you go away and you feel that you are really now the best curator for your hub for the next year? So let me see. Who goes away, and be honest, as you always are, who goes away and feels he has won a real good new friend here? Oh, wow. Who goes away and feels in some way his or her life has been transformed? And who goes away and feels he will be the best curator now for his hub? So, John, Radia, I think you achieved your objectives. Great, thank you. And to all the team, I know you are very interested in leadership. So I felt what I usually not do. I'm more an introvert person. And my colleagues know, despite some people who feel I have the best network in the world, but I usually have a very private life and do not go out for social events and so on. So I'm not very personal in what I'm speaking about, but I felt before you leave this afternoon, I would like to talk a little bit about leadership, how you strategize your life, my experience, and finally, how you implement your life. Then we may have time for some questions. Leadership, and some of you have heard me before, because I have a very simple concept of leadership. You know, I have been professor for 32 years, and I think I read hundreds of books, how you have to behave as a leader, what you have to do as a leader, how you have to cultivate your charisma. For me, leadership is very simple. Leadership consists of 5 dimensions. And I have created a metaphor so you don't forget the 5 dimensions. It's brains, heart, soul, muscles, and good nerves. And good nerves. I cannot show you my muscles. Even if I'm very proud because I do a lot of swimming, or everyday swim. But let me come back. Brains, heart, soul, muscles, and good nerves. Shall we repeat it? Okay, brains, heart, soul, and good nerves. So what stands the brains for? If you want to be a leader in whatever you do, you have to be a professional. You have to be well informed on what's going on. You have to show that, not necessarily to show, but you cannot be a leader in a domain where you have no knowledge of. For me, for example, this means that every evening, I just mentioned I'm not going out, every evening in principle, after having had dinner with my wife, I'm reading from around 7:30 to 11 o'clock, just to keep me up to date with what's going on. And you never can stop. So that's the brains. The heart is whatever you do, you have to do with passion. If you do not have passion and compassion, if you do not have passion, you will not succeed. Students came very often to me and asked, Professor, what should I do? Should I go into banking? Should I go into governments? Or should I become an entrepreneur? My answer was always, that's not the right question. You have to ask yourself the question, what are you passionate about? Because if you're passionate about something, you will succeed. If you are not passionate about something, you will fail in the long run. So that's the heart. Now the soul. In our very complex and fast-paced world, you need a compass. You need a direction. I remember when I my first day at Harvard University, there was someone who told me you have to go to a lecture of Professor Riesman. And then I never will forget this lecture, because he said, human beings are divided into two categories. Those who have a compass built in, which gives them the direction they have to go, and those who have a rudder system, who do not know in which directions they really want to go. But they send out continuously, like a plane or a boat in a fog, they send out signals to see what others are thinking and what others are doing. And then they adapt just to what the others are doing. I would say 95% of the politicians are probably are radar people. Compass shows you the way. Now, what does it mean? It means you have to have values which provide you a base in every situation of your life. You have to know what is right and what is not right. And you have to have a vision, a dream, which shows you the direction. Finally, the muscles. You have to implement. You have to be energetic in what you are doing. It's not enough to have passion and to have a great vision. You have to have the strength afterwards, the vitality to implement your vision. Good nerves. There are always situations where you may feel you are not in control, where you may feel hurt by other people. Just forget about it. Good nerves is key. Now, who would be the person who would come into your mind? Any idea? Any person who comes to your mind who represents optimally those 5 dimensions? Any idea? Yeah, yes, but actually for me is a person, and he was mentioned, who ideally represented all 5 dimensions, was Mandela. He was a man with great brains, passion, clear vision and values, but he was also an implementer, and he had good nerves. Now you can take whomever you mentioned and still ask somewhere, put somewhere a question mark. For example, some people would say, that's inside this room, Obama certainly stood for the 5 dimensions, but some people would say, did he really implement the vision, how he should have done it? So you could find, practically with every leader, some deficiency. So my message to you is just cultivate your brains, your heart, your soul, your muscles, and your good nerves. That's my first message. My second one is, how do you plan your life? And who of you is familiar with the SWOT analysis? Practically everybody. And I think this analysis or this concept, I had to teach it for 32 years to my students, but I think this is a concept which we should also adopt for our own lives, which means to be aware at any moment, what are the opportunities? What are the strengths we have? What are the threats? And what are the weaknesses? I made continuously in my life such a analysis, such a SWOT analysis of myself. Not for the forum, or of course also for the forum, but for myself. And then you define how you use best your strengths, how you exploit best opportunities, how you protect yourself against threats, and how you eliminate your weaknesses. But there's one very important thing in this whole concept and how to use it. Push more the positive side and not the negative side. Concentrate much more on the opportunities and on your strengths. And be not overwhelmed by the threats and the weaknesses. And I remember, again, in my university teaching, I used a case which clearly showed that companies, and I would say the same is certainly true for people, that those who concentrated on opportunities and on strengths were much more successful compared to those who always were, let's say, irritated by the weaknesses they had and by the threats they saw around themselves. So I would suggest, make a SWOT analysis for yourself and make it regularly and concentrate on opportunities and on strengths. This means also, if you concentrate on the positive side, you are much more optimistic about the future. You are not, let's say, so much focused on what could go wrong, but you see what you could achieve, could go right. I mentioned it yesterday to someone. We talked about optimists and pessimists. And Shimon Peres was mentioned. And Shimon told me once, look, optimists and pessimists, they have the same life expectancy. But optimists have a much happier life. And I think there's a lot of truth in it. And finally, my third wisdom of life is In the old world, we had APA. Today, you have IDA. What is APA? APA means you had a project, you analyze thoroughly the situation, plan. Once that's the A, the P, analyze, plan, and then you went into action. That was a good concept in the good old world, which was relatively stable, where you could take your time first to analyze, then to plan how you want to implement your ideas, and then to act. Today, you need a different concept because the world is so fast moving. You will never be in a situation where you know everything, which means when you start an initiative for something, you do not completely control the context. So, what you have to do, instead of planning, you have to design, dream. You have to create a very aspirational framework. That's the D. Then you have to explore instead of just acting and implement. You have to see and to test and what's going right, and finally you have to adapt. Then you will succeed. I'll give you an example. If you are today the automobile manufacturer, you do not know what at the end the final, let's say, propulsion system for cars will be. Will it be fuel, high-efficient engines driven by fuel or by diesel? Will it be hydrogen? Will it be electric? So if you are, let's say, whoever, Honda or Volkswagen, or you cannot wait until you know. And you have to be in all areas and to explore and to see, to be ready at the moment. When one technology breaks through, you have already done your homework and you can enter the market, or even you can lead the market. So go from APA to A, to dream, to dare, to dream, explore, and adapt. Those are the principles which have helped me very much in my life to succeed, but also to have a very satisfied life, because I feel very happy about what I have achieved, particularly if I look at you. The initiative of the Global Shapers, I think, is the most satisfying initiative I have undertaken in my life. Because I know that the seeds we are planting will have a lot of impact, results. We may not feel it always or be aware of it, but I go back to my question, if I know that we had an impact on your individual lives, that you will be a multiplier in carrying the message to your hubs. Just imagine if we can influence 10,000 people or 7,000 now. Great, great. So, let's see whether you have time for one or two questions. Let's see, anybody would like to follow up or take up some other? We speak about leadership and personal experience. Anybody? Yeah? Can you wait for the microphone? No, what? I know you have a very commanding voice, but...
Thank you. I'm Cristina Martinez from Mexico City Hub. Welcome. It's, for the past days, we've been reporting out with our teams on our fellow shapers, on our learnings, on our aha moments. And I'm really curious to know what have been yours. What have been those special aha moments that have impacted and transformed your life?
Of course, you have positive aha moments, and you have sometimes also more disappointing aha moments. I mean, certain things which you will never forget. Sometimes those are very small things. I think the most difficult things are when you have the choice. I spoke about the soul and the direction and so on. When you are tempted, and you will be always tempted, to deviate from your values or from your dreams, from the implementation of your dreams. For me, difficult moment. I don't know even whether my colleagues know, but I had created the forum after, as you know, an academic career and a business career. Then I got the offer actually to chair as a member of the managing board. But at that time was the sixth largest German company at the age of 35 or 36. And of course it was financially very attractive. So at this moment to say, no, I want to devote my life to this idea of the stakeholder concept, I think that was very important. I give you, where are our Brazilians? We have many Brazilians, just raise your hands. Ah. I don't know whether it's a long time ago, it's 40 years ago, and you may not remember because you were not born. There was a Brazilian archbishop. He was called Don Elder Camara. Does it ring a bell? No. Don Elder Camara was the bishop of Recife. And he was well known in the Catholic Church at that time as a kind of, how shall I say, leftist outsider. He was the father of what maybe you may have heard about Liberation Church, which means very, I would say, radical communist approach to the Catholic Church. Commitment to poverty. Even the present Pope is very much influenced by the Liberation Church. I'm not Catholic, by the way. But my brother was an industrialist in Brazil, and I went to Brazil, it was 74, 75. And he said, actually you should see also poverty in Brazil. And I know a bishop, he's very well known. I know, by the way, a trade union leader whom you should know. So I met the trade union leader in his office in Sao Paulo. Would you know his name? Lula, yeah. So I know Lula since 40 years. So I went to Recife, and I established a very interesting relationship with this cardinal. He showed me, it was for the first time that I saw so much poverty because I had grown up, let's say, not in such conditions. And I felt this bishop has a message for the people in Davos. So I invited him to Davos. Then when I came back to Switzerland, I only became aware how much he was, let's say, he was considered as an enemy of the free market system and so on. And he actually, Switzerland at that time had still a list of people who were not allowed to make public speeches. And I got the threat of boycott from a number of companies if I would continue to invite him. I would stick to my invitation. This is such an aha moment. And it cost us the partnership of a number of companies, but he spoke in Davos. So you have to have the courage from time to time to stand up for your values when you are tested. So, there was a question here.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Professor Schwab. My name is Akil from the Munich Hub. One of the things, thanks.
Grüß Gott.
Grüß Gott, servus. One of the things that inspired me the most was our vulnerability session. And I'm a firm believer that every single person has a failure success rate. And I would like to know if you would be so kind to share one of your failures, because we hear a lot about all the success stories around here, and I think we can learn a lot from failures too.
This may nearly sound arrogant, what I tell you. But I could not, let's say, think back, see major failures. But one thing I think is clear, two lessons I learned. The first one is, you have an idea, becomes a dream, you're very passionate about it. It usually takes longer to translate an idea or a dream into reality compared to what you think. Just take Toplink. Toplink was always an idea for me, why not to create a digital interaction system? And I started with it about 25 years ago. And it didn't work. I probably created the first dedicated internet before the internet existed, which means a system which interconnected our partners. We did a test with the construction industry via computer-based communication. It had, which was quite new and which is for you such a, let's say, given reality. You could communicate one to many or one to all, which is relatively new. Because if you had only the phone, it was always one-to-one. Now, we established such a system 30 years ago, and it failed because the technology was not yet ready, and particularly there was one very, you cannot imagine. At that time, if you had a communication one-to-many, let's say we interconnected the construction industry, and you had someone writing to all his colleagues, let's assume 200 colleagues around the world, he had to pay 200 times the individual communication. And at that time, telecommunication fees were much higher than today. So for one communication, one-to-many, you may have occurred a bill of 2,000 to 3,000 Swiss francs. So it became financially unsustainable. I'm also thinking at the moment, how could we do what we are doing and using much more blockchain? But again, with all the hype about blockchain, when you go into details and into technological realities, it's not yet ripe. So the message is, don't look at your life in terms of failures. If you have a good idea, don't give it up. It may take much more time than what you have originally envisaged. I know there is a question from our Paris friend. Where is he? He asked me this morning a question and I said, wait until this afternoon. Yeah.
In a couple of hours, and I was told by your chief of staff that it was difficult to catch up with the pace that you set. So how do you manage to cope with the jet lag?
It's a more general question. How do you preserve your energy? That's, of course, when you have my age, that's the question people very often ask. I would say two things, or three things. First, three things, yeah. First, keep your life simple. It seems simple, but just avoid doing things which do not add in a sustained way to your own goals. And even in absorbing today information, when I look, I usually read in the morning, 6:15 to 6:45, or 7, I read emails and newspapers. I judge what I pick out on the basis, is it for me interesting to read, even in 2, 3, 4 weeks, 1 year, or is it just interesting now because it's a story? So it's not just in reading habits, but in your life habits. Don't do things which, of course you have to enjoy the moment. For me, walking in the mountains is, enjoying the moment is very important. But don't lose time with something which I would say is not positive. I also have made a habit, of course, when you are in my position, you read articles which annoy you because people are saying not always nice things about you. Just forget about it. Don't lose time with something which is negative in your life. There may be people who don't like you. Okay, forget about them. Don't be mentally occupied with negative things in your life. Now, a last thing to your, you spoke particularly about jet lag. Keep your life not only simple, but try to conduct your life with a certain discipline. Even if it's, I mean, I'm failing. I should be 3 kilos less. But nevertheless, I have a certain discipline. I do everyday sports, swimming every day a mile. No, I'm not, let's say, I like red wine and so on, but just everything in a moderate way, and avoiding things where you clearly know, like cigarettes and so on. Why should you cut? If I look back at my life, I had a great life the last 10 years. If I had smoken, I probably would have a life expectancy 5-6 years shorter. The moment you smoke, you don't regret it. But when your life expectancy is really reduced, why should you pay such a price for it? So, discipline, keep your life simple, and don't lose energy with something which is negative. It's easier said, by the way, than done. It's easier said than done. And just my own way is jet lag, to be more specific. I'm doing about Ingrid, my chief of staff, is, Katrin is not here. Probably about 15 nights, which I spent, at least, which I spent in the plane. Just forget about it. Don't think about it. Don't think about it. And when I'm coming in the morning from New York, the plane arrives here at 9:20, 11 o'clock latest after shower, I'm in the office. And just switch into the new pattern. Very last question. I'm not choosing, so.
Prof, over here.
Yeah. Well,
Right at the back.
yeah, okay.
Mandisa Gaba from the Soweto Hub, South Africa.
Yeah.
Most of us in the room are under 30, and we're very hard on ourselves as we chase after our dreams and our goals. Knowing what you know now, having achieved all you've achieved, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
What advice to my?
20-year-old self, looking back at...
I would say either to my 40-year-old son or to my 10-year-old grandson. There's no simple advice. You are all individuals. Isn't it great? You are 350 individual persons here in this room, 400 individual. Each, that makes our life so rich. Each of you has its own potential. Each of you has its own passion. So general advice would be wrong. I would just come back to what I said. Ask yourself what dream you have, what you are passionate about it, what direction you want to go, and then think in terms of your strengths and opportunities, and try to develop your own personality and not to become a robot. You know, some people consider me as the father of the fourth industrial revolution. I think this is particularly important now. With the fourth industrial revolution, we have a tendency to equalize everything, to robotize. Here, the person whom we need in the future, a person who shows his human traits, is proud of his human traits. Human traits express themselves not always in a positive way, sometimes also in a negative way. Let's accept it. If, you see, for me, see, if people, of course, you can imagine, ask me very often, what do you want to leave as a legacy? I'm just astonished that this question didn't come up, because it's a usual question. I have a very simple answer. In order to be successful as the head of even of a not-for-profit foundation, international organization like the Forum, I have to make sure that in the balance sheet we have more income than costs, more inputs than output. The personal life, I think you have to ask yourself the question the other way around. If everybody of you gives more to society than he or she takes in, then we will really improve the state of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Schwab.